I'm Jennifer Byrne, and welcome to what's known around the club as our addiction show, because that's the theme running through both our books tonight, addictions and recovery. The new release is High Sobriety, Melbourne journalist Jill Stark's chronicle of the year she gave up alcohol and discovered more than she'd ever imagined about this country's obsession with drink. Our classic, well, not so much classic as a legend for its size, its density, its mix of comedy and despair, it's Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, regarded by some as a work of genius, the book of the late 20th century, by others as unreadable tosh. But we have all set aside weeks of our lives to read it and its 388 footnotes, not that I'm counting, to see what all the fuss is about. So it's quite a show. Let's start by welcoming back my friends Marieke and Jason Steger. Our first guest is a singer and songwriter, frontman for Something for Cate. So won't you give, please, a warm book club welcome to avid reader and bringer of the jest, Mr. Paul Dempsey. And it's welcome back to our second guest, a veteran of the club. Oh, sounds bad, isn't it, veteran? But since she last appeared, she's published the dazzling short story collection Like a House on Fire. She is one of our finest and most interesting writers, Cate Kennedy. Now, to our classic, this beer moth. Paul has brought us about addiction, about tennis, Quebec separatists, about environmental calamity, and about a film so compelling it literally entertains people to death. We are talking about David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest. Who wouldn't want to read that book? Or, in the case of Paul Dempsey, read that book 5 times. Take us back to the first time you read Infinite Jest.
The first time was in about 2003. It was recommended to me by a friend we have very similar tastes in books, and I knew in the first couple of pages that I was not going to be able to put this down. It's about addiction and entertainment. And passivity, I would say. Choosing to engage or to be passive.
Living at the end of the 20th century. Mm. We will come back for more on your favourite book. Marieke.
I don't know. I don't know what I feel. I don't know what I think about it. Since I put it down, since I threw it across the room when I finished it, which I did, and that was hefty. I can't tell if it's a masterpiece or a massive pile of art wank, and I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I did throw it across the room, and I thought, well, to hell with you and the time of mine that you've wasted, Foster Wallace. And then went to bed and woke up the next morning still thinking about it. Went and looked it up on the internet, found a beautifully written explanation or précis of someone else's interpretation of the book. It's the sadly departed Aaron Swartz, who was a computer programmer who also took his own life like David Foster Wallace, which explained everything very clearly, and of course then it opened the book up like a flower. But then I can't tell, I don't know if I want to read a book that needs a separate explanation, that you need to go somewhere else in order to have it explained.
But there's no telling that was the right explanation. I've read 4 really coherent explanations.
I think Swartz's, to me, I thought it was... Have you read Aaron Swartz's explanation?
No, I know what you're talking about, but yeah, I haven't gotten to it yet. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it makes it all clear. To me, it made it all clear.
Unless he's wrong.
But
He's not. Oh, see,
This book, it was so immersive because it takes so long to read. It's like part of your life for so many months. It's like I felt married to the book, actually.
I can't believe yours is in such good nick. Look at mine.
In fact, it's not good to be married to a book like this because it takes up so much of your time. My husband calls it Infinite Jest, actually. But I found, very much like a relationship, I began and I was totally overwhelmed and in awe of this person's talent and just couldn't get enough of it. And then as time went on, very much like a relationship, it began to wear a bit thinner with me. Until finally I was saying, oh, can't you just be quiet? Can you just shut up?
Yeah.
You know, like it's like being trapped in a house full of amazing interconnected rooms with the smartest person on the planet. There is no two ways about that. He is a genius. He is an intellect like you would just never find again. And yet he's like following you around the room at you all the time. I found that I was totally overwhelmed by the kind of extraordinary density and scope. It was like a big, unholy mess of something, and I could sort of see this amazing genius. I actually read concurrently his non-fiction, which I absolutely loved. I thought was brilliant. And I'd come back to the fiction, and it was just like, what, is there 4 books in here? Is there, it's sort of, it's such a postmodern kind of incredible scramble of ideas that I must say at the end I was glad to get to the end of the book. It was like a big test.
He makes the exit the last door, the hardest
It is. There doesn't
the hardest
really
bit to track.
I couldn't even say, does the plot finish? There doesn't really seem to be a plot that needs to be finished. It's like an incredible, as you said, it's like we are being entertained to death, you know.
So, a relationship, what's your metaphor?
Well, I found, I mean, I think it is a masterpiece, some sort of masterpiece. I'm just not quite sure what sort of masterpiece. I mean, it is a sort of berserk book. I had all sorts of responses to it. I was bored, I laughed. I mean, it is incredibly funny at times, it really is. I was moved by a lot of it. I think it is an amazing book. Now that I've
Survived
now that I've survived it and I've seen the arc of the book, in a way, it'd be good to go back and read it again, because you'd actually... No, I really think you could. I really think you could.
Will you, though?
Will you?
Oh, well, I don't know if I have the time. I don't know if I have the time.
No.
And as a footnote to that previous comment...
What's he trying to do? Why is he writing a book that is both... You know, I think we all agree it is brilliant. It's genius. But that it is so difficult to actually traverse. Not to read, but to traverse the terrain.
I think one of the things he's trying to suggest in the book is that entertainment and, you know, these sorts of things, you can be very passive. You can just, you know, and, you know, whether he's talking about drugs or short films or whatever, you know, you can be very...
Or the desire to win in tennis. These are all addictions.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think what, you know, the difference is that, you know, there's one kind of entertainment where you're just sort of completely passively having the reward centre of your brain just pinged. And you can just keep doing that with substances or entertainment. Or there's another thing where you can put in great effort and you know, like with the tennis stuff, you know, you can put in great sustained effort to potentially reap huge rewards. So I think there's an intention behind writing such a gigantic book that requires you to flip back and forth to 300 and something footnotes. It's, you know, he wanted you to work for it a little bit, but he was also aware of, you know, making sure that you were entertained. Yeah. I don't think he he's nice to the reader. You know, I don't think he's trying to punish you. You know, I think the book is very entertaining enough that you keep going. You don't feel like you're being led down the garden path.
See, I disagree with that. I think it's a very hostile book. I think the unfortunate thing for me is that he sets up a very hostile relationship between himself and the reader. I found that some passages of the narrative were really beautiful and you're on his side, and he has said that he put the footnotes in there deliberately to disrupt the narrative. That's what he wants to do, and it's jarring on occasion. And sometimes the footnotes are not worth going to. It's an explanation of something that...
But sometimes
did you ever
skip
but
sometimes they're not. No, I'm very
because you
diligent.
can't. Yeah, you can't.
No,
skip.
yeah, there are some... But I thought occasionally you flip to a footnote and David Foster Wallace was standing there giving you the middle finger.
His intellect is extraordinary, isn't it? Like, he is across everything. He is an amazing thinker. And as I said, I read concurrently with this his non-fiction, which is brilliant and lucid and funny and compassionate and beautiful. And he's kind of on task in a way which I didn't find as rewarding in his fiction. Even if it is an anti-narrative, even if it is a narrative that's jumbled and it's impossible to describe what's going on in the book, it is impossible. There are some things in the endnotes that should be in the text to me, and some things in the text probably should be in the endnotes.
But one argument I've heard is that a bit like, let's take the example of Moby Dick,
Yep.
right? One of the great books. And when you read that, sometimes you think, oh, why do I want to hear one more thing about the nature of the whaling industry in 1800s or whatever? But that's the point. You've got to be obsessed in the way that Ahab is obsessed about the whale. And you could argue that for Infinite Jest, that you've got to be fractured, splintered, torn, distracted, uncertain where the centre is, why the centre will not hold. You've got to be there, confused, discombobulated, entertained, bored.
But this
otherwise you won't understand the book.
Absolutely. And the bit about addiction and the bit that's set in Enfield House, the bit that's talking about Don Gately and his kind of character and the stuff that happens, it's like, I love those bits. I think that is a book in itself, I think. What happens at the addiction centre is the book.
And I just think the characters themselves are, you know, enough. Like, I just fell in love with all those characters so much. I was just so with them. Just like, you can't believe that this all came out of one individual's brain.
And he was, what, 34 or something at the time?
I think it's like what you were saying, Jen. You know, you read it and you're confused and it's brilliant. And it's like being inside David Foster Wallace's head. And he was a brilliant and very unhappy person. And you are deeply inside his head. So it's very confrontational, I think.
It's hard. It's a hard place to be.
It is so much about sort of psychic pain. When we talk about addiction, I guess, I really found it, here's a man who is full of pain and he can't, as I said, he can't stop talking. He can't stop. He's got this amazing energy, which is like hyper and manic and just cannot sit and be quiet. And the characters with all that talking remind me of all the different voices that must be there fighting for attention inside that incredible intellect.
I had to treat it like a job in the end. I just had to go write 100 pages a day.
Yeah,
that's what I had to do.
And then it felt onerous.
Yeah.
So we have to read something like, oh, that book again. I don't want to be in that joyless state
and then
any more than I want to be.
You finish the 100 pages and you reward yourself with a drink. Then Jill Starr comes along, kills the party. Nightmare.
On that point, we will move. Thank you very much for bringing it. I'm really glad I read it, but I'm with you. I change my mind multiple times every day as to what that experience meant to me.
We obviously have to read it again.
Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. And that is our club for another month. A big thank you to tonight's heroic book clubbers. Thank you, Paul, Marieke, Jason and Cate.